Hi, my name's Steve. I'm born and raised in England, currently living in Bradley Stoke, and I'm married to my wife Hazel, and we have two children, Silas and Lydia, and I'm qualified as an architect a long time ago and been practicing as such, but more recently I'm also involved in property development and also project manager at the Bristol Housing Festival. So my early experiences with Christianity, both my parents are Christians, so I was born into a family where, belief in God, Bible reading, going to church, praying, it was all, just part of life. For as long as I can remember, I've always sensed that there is a God or believed that there is something more than just this. I lived in England for the first 5 years of my life, and then we moved back to Korea. Even while we were in England, my parents being Korean, they emigrated in the 60s. Even though I was born and raised in England, I still identify myself as Korean, And I suppose being exposed to two cultures, living in two cultures, has really shaped the way I regard myself, and also how it's formed a lens through which I've viewed Christianity, through which I viewed God and the world. So, like a lot of Asian cultures, Korean culture, it's a shame honor based culture, and I guess you would classify it as a traditional culture in that, a lot of the perception of who you are and your self identity it's rooted in what other people think of you, especially your family and your parents. How my identity was very much based on whether or not I was fulfilling my parents' expectations. When my parents moved back to Korea and I ended up back in England in boarding school, the culture, the society, it was much more inward looking. It was much more about, follow your dreams, do what makes you feel good. Those were the kind of messages that I was getting, and that was very much in contrast to what I had grown up with at home, which was, it's not about you, it's about the family, it's about, what people think. So a seminal moment for me was going to boarding school. So I was 8 years old when I started attending boarding school in England. My parents were living in Korea at the time. So although I was returning to the country of my birth, I was, whatever it is, thousands of miles away from home. And as an 8-year-old, I guess it is young to be going to boarding school, but as a person, I was very insecure as a child. I think I did my best to hide it, and I just tried lots of different masks to see how I would fit in, how I could be accepted. I tried to be tough, I tried to be funny, I tried to be extreme, a clown, whatever, just to try and gain some acceptance. And there have been some significant moments in boarding school. I think the one that sticks out to me was when there was a group of boys that ganged up on me. I don't think it was anything particularly serious, but I just couldn't handle the rejection. I couldn't handle it, and I ran away from school, and one of the matrons had to kind of run after me. So boarding school for me, I have mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, it is an incredible privilege, going through private education where you've got great opportunities, high expectations of you. I remember Stephen Hawking came and spoke at one of our open days. That was the kind of exposure that I had when I was at school. So it was always not, are you going to uni? It was always, are you going to go to Oxford or are you going to go to Cambridge? I didn't go to either, just to put it out there. But that was the kind of environment. And it is a privilege. But at the same time, as an insecure 8-year-old, it's a sink or swim environment. You're either going to sink or you're going to swim. And I think I swam. But it was at the expense of, I think ultimately at the expense of my soul, because I was doing things that I knew were wrong just to gain acceptance. I got into drinking and drugs and pornography very early, very young age. I got suspended for going into town and getting drunk and things like that. So those kinds of behaviours, they got instilled in me at quite a young age. And I remember hearing an expression: a choice made often enough becomes a habit. A habit forms a personality, and a personality reaps a destiny. And I can see how that's played out with me. Let's fast forward a bit. Went to uni, met my future wife Hazel during postgrad, and she was an architect, training as an architect as well, and we got to the point where we finished our studies, we moved to London, and we were thinking about marriage, thinking about the next step. And for some reason, even though I wasn't living as a Christian, although I had a belief, I had some kind of faith, and I'd made various commitments along the way, I certainly wasn't living like Jesus was in my life. I was just doing what I wanted. For some reason, I said to Hazel, look, I will only marry you if you're Christian. And there was massive hypocrisy in that, because Hazel, she was a good girl. Well, she is a good girl, very straight down the line. And here was me with all these kind of dysfunctional behaviours and destructive behaviours. But I guess that made her curious about faith, about God, about Jesus and Christianity. So by the time we were in London, we started attending the same church. She started to explore Christianity for herself. And as we became part of this church, I guess that was, by that point I was in my 20s, and that was the point where I think I started to get a bit more serious about my faith. I started to question, is my faith real? Do I really believe in Jesus and what he did on the cross and what his resurrection means? Do I really believe it? Because at the moment my life is the same as everyone else's. And obviously Hazel was a massive challenge to me, because as she was approaching Christianity and looking at it, we were kind of wrestling with it together, but coming from different places. And we became committed to this church in London. We had a small group, a home group, and we were all. It was a really, really fond memories of that time. We were close. As a home group, we were all similar age, similar stages of life. That was the time when I started to pursue Jesus, I think. It's very hard for me to say when I became a Christian, because I've made commitments when I was a teenager. I made a commitment, during uni, but nothing changed. So I can't really say, well, that was when I became a Christian. I can't tell you the point. I just know it was at some point in my 20s, when Hazel and I were both going to church together, and we were just involved in a church family. The difference that becoming a follower of Jesus has made is that, as I mentioned earlier, the first thing is it challenged me, and it just shone a light on what was going on in my life. I think ultimately it's led me, it's pointed me towards identity, self-image. Who am I? Before I mentioned about my identity being rooted initially in my parents and what other people expected and thought of me, and then I kind of transitioned. Once I kind of rejected that, I transitioned to trying to find my identity in making myself fulfilled by pursuing things that made me feel good. and the key thing, certainly at this point in my journey, is that actually my identity is not, it comes from God. It's about, what matters is what he thinks of me and what he said. And so that was when the truth, the kind of the story, the Christian message, the gospel of Jesus dying on a cross for my sins started to become really real and started to sink into my heart. It's like, okay, I've done all these horrible things that I'm ashamed of, and yet I'm supposed to believe that God loves me, that he wants me, and that not only that when Jesus died on that cross, he paid for all of that stuff. God's love is like nothing like I've experienced, and nothing I can really fathom. But I've had glimpses of it. I think we all get drawn towards stories of self-sacrifice, of the person with great privilege coming down and serving those with none. And this was just like the ultimate expression of that. What I would want to say to someone watching this, I would just encourage you to think about hope. Where is your hope? Is it in other people? Is it in your circumstances? Is it in yourself? And I think when you think about that, you realise that it's shaky, that it's fragile. When you put all of your hope in someone or something or even yourself, you know that there is every chance that they will fail you, the situation will fail you, or you will fail yourself. That's what I would encourage anyone watching this, is to explore hope and find it in Jesus Christ.